My name's Neil Andrew. I'm a professor at the University of Wollongong in Australia, and my area of interest is small-scale fisheries, particularly in the developing world. Fisheries in the developing world are classically overfished and are not providing societal benefits that people need from those fisheries. Now, in the developing world, that's principally around food and income. And we can make small amounts of progress using a case study approach, but if we want to have the level of development that we think we need to improve those lives, then we need to engage in a much more systematic way of doing things with a much broader network. And typically we engage with national governments, with other research organisations. But through this network we can engage with not only that audience, not only that constituency, but a huge network of very talented academics from all over the world, particularly North American academics, and that will accelerate the progress that we can make in development. So fisheries management is about using science so that a group of people can make rules and stick to those rules. And those rules are normally about how they fish, where they fish, and how much fish they take. So in a developed world context, where the rule of law is strong, where there are highly evolved processes for doing stock assessments, for making a bridge between research and management, there's a different set of opportunities for having research make a difference. Now, when you move to the developing world, that really is not appropriate because of capacity, because of the nature of the fisheries, because of the remoteness of the people, language, politics, many, many different things. So when you move to the developing world, that highly formalised, almost stylised way of doing fisheries management is not appropriate. And so you need to take a philosophically different approach to using information to improve fisheries. Yes, I don't hold to this crisis narrative in fisheries. I think there are many places in the developing world where fisheries are providing the benefits that people want from them, that fisheries are providing food, providing income, and are performing the functions expected of them. That is not universally true, and in many places in the developing world, fisheries are a disaster. So it's just a question of getting more nuanced about the story we tell about fisheries in the developing world. It's not all doom and gloom, and it's not all fine. So it's just moving past that narrative into a deeper understanding so that we can do things better. These fisheries are, in many parts of the world, these fisheries are often the only source of animal source food they have. They're not big consumers of other forms of meat, basically. So these fisheries are very, very large. Although we call them small scale, the small scale description is more about how they fish. So they take short trips rather than very long trips. They use small boats. The boats may or may not have motors. So it's a description of how they fish rather than the size of the fishery. Some of the fisheries in the Asian megadeltas are enormous, possibly more than 1 million tonnes a year. And so not only are they small scale, they're very dispersed, and they are feeding a lot of people and providing a lot of employment. Now, as it was in the Western world a long time ago, it's usual for people to not just fish. They might describe themselves as fishermen, culturally they might identify as fishermen, but they also do other things in their lives, so agriculture, other forms of income generation. So the way we think of it is that we think about fishing as being part of a portfolio of livelihoods that people use to get by. Now that's distinct from what's known as sort of the professionalisation of fisheries in the West, where you are a fisherman and you have quota and that's sort of what you do, and you're described as a fisherman and you might do some fishing on the summer or something, but that's not the norm in the developing world. So we tend to talk about fishing as part of a livelihood rather than just a job, and that offers up different opportunities and offers up different potential threats and constraints. I prefer to think of it as information rather than data. Data, to me, you think about numbers. I think a lot of the information that we need to improve fisheries is possibly not quantitative data. It's narrative-based, it's understanding the management process and engaging in that process more than a classical approach to understanding how many fish are caught, how big the fish are and so on. So I think we need not to try and transplant a Western approach to fisheries management into the developing world. I think we take the best of the lessons from the developing world, and there are some fundamental ecological truths about catching fish, but I think we need to think about it differently and with a different skill set, which is much more social, which is much more invested in the management process rather than the provision of data. I think there are some broad lessons about how fish respond to fishing, how fish stocks respond to fishing, attributes of the management process such as rights-based approaches that give people a right to fish. I think these are things that are useful, but they're not universal, and nor are they universally applicable. So I think there are some lessons that we can take, but I think there is so much knowledge, there is so much insight in the developing world that is different than that we should go to the developing world and start there rather than try and implant a process and a way of thinking that works with an entirely different governance and cultural context.